"You'll never be enough for them, you know," she said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. Her voice, usually a coup designed to disarm, was sharp, brittle. I remember looking at her, across the polished mahogany of her dining table, the afternoon sun glinting off the ridiculous diamond on her ring finger, and I knew. Not that I wasn't enough, that was a given, a constant hum beneath the surface of our interactions. But that conversation, this exact moment, was the pivot. It was the point where the carefully constructed facade of reluctant acceptance, of polite distance, finally shattered, revealing the sheer, unadulterated avarice beneath. My twins, barely 5 years old, were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that they were being appraised, their future commodified in a way that chilled me to the bone. My husband, bless his oblivious heart, was out on a golf course, blissfully unaware of the financial and emotional battlefield his mother was meticulously laying out. My own world, the quiet, ordered existence I'd painstakingly built to shield my children from this very toxicity, felt suddenly fragile, like a pane of glass about to be struck. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was a woman of significant means. Her husband, my father-in-law, had been a shrewd businessman, and she had inherited not just his wealth, but his ruthless pragmatism. For years, I'd navigated the treacherous waters of her disapproval with a kind of quiet resilience. It wasn't about winning her over, I'd learned early on that was a fool's errand. It was about survival, about protecting my peace and, more importantly, my children's innocence. She'd always been a master of the subtle jab, the backhanded compliment that left a sting. When my eldest, Leo, learned to read exceptionally early, she'd commented, "Oh, he's so bright. A real little scholar. Not like my son, who always preferred sports, bless his heart." The implication was clear. My son's intelligence was a fortunate anomaly, not a reflection of my influence or genes. Or when my daughter, Clara, showed a flair for art, she'd gifted me a book on financial planning, remarking, "It's so important for girls to be practical, darling. Art is lovely, but it doesn't pay the bills." Every interaction was a test, a subtle attempt to mold me, to mold my children, into a shape that suited her vision of a perfect, wealthy family. I learned to smile, to nod, to absorb the barbs like a sponge, never letting them break the surface. My husband, caught between his loyalty to his mother and his love for his family, was often a bewildered spectator, occasionally offering a weak defense that was quickly diffused by Eleanor's practiced charm. He saw the surface, the elegant dinners, the generous gifts. He didn't see the veiled threats, the condescension, the constant pressure to conform. The build-up today had been particularly intense. Eleanor had been making frequent, unsolicited visits, her focus laser-sharp on the twins. She'd brought them extravagant toys, which I'd discreetly put away, opting for more educational ones instead. She'd also started making pronouncements about their future schooling, their extracurricular activities. I've always envisioned Leo at St. Ignatius, of course. It's where his grandfather went. And Clara, well, a finishing school would be just the thing for her. I'd gently steered the conversation, suggesting local schools that aligned with our values and our budget. Her smiles had tightened, her eyes had taken on that familiar, calculating glint. She'd even offered to help with the tuition, a veiled offer of control disguised as generosity. I'd thanked her, demurred, and felt the weight of her expectations pressing down. The psychological toll was immense. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, my every decision scrutinized, my every word analyzed. I found myself becoming hypervigilant, anticipating her moves, preparing my defenses. The quiet endurance was exhausting, a constant drain on my energy and my spirit. I'd confided in a close friend once, her advice a mirror of my own internal struggle: just keep your head down. Don't give her ammunition. And I had. I had swallowed my pride, bitten my tongue, and focused on creating a safe haven for my children, a world where their worth was measured not in dollars, but in love and laughter. And then came the offer. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that felt ordinary until it wasn't. The twins were upstairs, their laughter a distant melody, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere that had settled in the dining room. Eleanor had summoned me, a subtle summons disguised as a casual invitation for tea. The air in her opulent home, usually thick with the scent of expensive lilies and lemon polish, felt charged, heavy. She'd poured me a cup of Earl Grey, her movements precise, almost surgical. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ticking of a ridiculously ornate grandfathe. Our clock. Her fingers, adorned with more diamonds than I cared to count, tapped a slow rhythm on the porcelain saucer. I've been thinking a great deal about Leo and Clara's future, she began, her voice softer now, a dangerous lull before the storm. I braced myself, my grip tightening on my teacup. You've done a decent job, considering. That was her version of praise. I waited. But I've also been watching them. They have so much potential. So much to offer the world. She paused, her gaze unwavering, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely compelling. I want to secure that potential. I want to ensure they have every opportunity their lineage deserves. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with a chilling sincerity. I'm prepared to offer you $22 million. $22 million for the twins. A substantial nest egg for them, of course, and a considerable severance for you. You can walk away, start anew, and I can raise them in a way that truly honors their heritage. The words hung in the air, a grotesque tapestry woven from greed, entitlement, and a profound lack of understanding. $22 million. For my children. It wasn't an offer, it was a transaction. A cold, hard, calculated business deal. I felt a physical jolt, as if I'd been punched in the gut. The room seemed to tilt. The expensive lilies suddenly smelled cloying, suffocating. My children. My Leo and Clara. Being put up for sale. The sheer audacity of it, the utter depravity, was staggering. I saw it then, in the calculating gleam of her eyes, the smug curl of her lips. She truly believed she was doing me a favor. She saw my role as temporary, a placeholder until she could take over and mold them into her own image. The feeling of betrayal wasn't just for myself, it was for my children, for the pure, unconditional love I had for them, a love that was apparently worth less than a multi-million-dollar inheritance. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. Those reactions, I knew, were precisely what she expected, what she craved. They would give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble, of confirming her assessment of my inadequacy. Instead, a profound, icy calm descended. It was the calm of a predator that had finally identified its prey, but instead of attacking, it chose to observe, to wait, to plan. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the polished floor. Thank you for your generous offer, Eleanor, I said, my voice unnervingly steady. But I will not be selling my children. Her smug smile wavered for a fraction of a second. She'd expected a tantrum, not this quiet refusal. Oh, darling, she purred, recovering quickly, don't be dramatic. It's simply a financial arrangement. For their benefit. Their benefit is with me, I replied, my gaze meeting hers directly. And my husband. I turned and walked towards the door. As I reached it, I paused. One more thing, Eleanor. I turned back, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. You mentioned securing their potential. You said they have so much to offer. You're absolutely right. I walked out of the dining room, leaving her sitting there, her tea growing cold, her smug certainty beginning to crack. The next few weeks were a blur of calculated action. I didn't confront my husband immediately. Instead, I meticulously gathered every shred of evidence of Eleanor's financial dealings, her intricate web of trusts, her offshore accounts, her history of creative accounting. I hired a discreet, highly competent forensic accountant, a woman who specialized in family disputes and complex estates. She was thorough, patient, and utterly without sentiment. We spent hours poring over documents, cross-referencing bank statements, tracing the flow of money. It was tedious, soul-crushing work, but I felt a grim satisfaction with every new piece of information that surfaced. I discovered Eleanor had been systematically siphoning funds from various family trusts, not just for her own lavish lifestyle, but also to underwrite a series of increasingly risky investments made by her favored nephew, a man with a penchant for gambling and a complete lack of business acumen. My husband's financial advisors, who had always lauded Eleanor's shrewdness, were apparently either complicit or blissfully ignorant. It was a house of cards, built on a foundation of deception. The moment of truth arrived at a planned family gathering, a summer barbecue at my husband's parents' sprawling estate. The air was thick with the scent of grilling meat and forced pleasantries. Eleanor, resplendent in a pale blue linen suit, was holding court, regaling a small group of relatives with tales of her latest philanthropic endeavors. My husband was by her side, looking uncomfortable but dutiful. I waited until the moment was right, until a lull in the conversation, until all eyes were, if not on me, then in my general vicinity. I walked over, a slim manila envelope in my hand. "Eleanor," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the ambient noise. "I wanted to discuss your generous offer for Leo and Clara." A ripple of curiosity went through the group. Eleanor's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, darling, we've already discussed that," she said, her tone dismissive. I opened the envelope and produced a single, crisp document. It was a detailed report from the forensic accountant, outlining Eleanor's financial improprieties. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't need to. I simply placed it on the table in front of her, letting the stark headings and financial figures speak for themselves. I watched her eyes scan the first few lines. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. Her perfectly manicured hands began to tremble. The diamonds on her fingers seemed to mock her. The smugness vanished, replaced by a raw, unadulterated panic. She snatched the report, her fingers fumbling. One of the relatives, a distant cousin who'd always been sycophantic towards Eleanor, leaned in, trying to decipher the document. His eyes widened. I saw the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the sudden silence that fell over the group, the dawning realization on their faces. Eleanor looked up at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, animalistic fear. She tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp escaped her lips. My husband, finally jolted out of his comfortable obliviousness, looked from his mother to the document, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. I didn't gloat. I didn't offer a single word of triumph. I simply met her panicked gaze, my expression neutral. The fortune she had so blithely offered to leverage for her own ends had, in fact, been her undoing. Her meticulously constructed empire of wealth and influence, built on a foundation of manipulation and avarice, was about to crumble. The aftermath was swift and brutal, though entirely bloodless. The family gathering dissolved into chaos. Frantic whispers turned into open accusations. Eleanor's favored nephew, the recipient of her investments, was nowhere to be found. My husband, reeling from the revelations, finally saw the truth of his mother's character. He was devastated, confused, but ultimately, he stood by me. Eleanor's carefully cultivated network of sycophants and enablers began to unravel. The news of her financial indiscretions spread like wildfire through their exclusive social circles. Lawyers were hired, investigations were launched, and the facade of her respectability was irrevocably shattered. She found herself ostracized, her name synonymous with scandal. The $22 million, of course, was never offered. It had been a phantom lure, a tool of manipulation, and now, a symbol of her complete financial and social ruin. She had attempted to buy her way into my children's lives, to usurp my role, and in doing so, she had lost everything. Her fortune, once vast and seemingly unassailable, was entangled in legal battles and asset freezes. Her social standing evaporated. She was left with nothing but the hollow echo of her own greed. My husband and I focused on our children, on rebuilding our lives, now free from the suffocating pressure of Eleanor's influence. The silence that followed her downfall was profound. No angry calls, no more manipulative texts, no flying monkeys attempting to defend her. Just a quiet, almost eerie peace. I didn't seek revenge, I simply allowed her own actions to consume her. The satisfaction wasn't in her suffering, but in the absolute clarity of her undoing. She had underestimated me, had viewed me as merely a transactional obstacle. She had learned, far too late, that the bonds of family, the love for one's children, were not a currency that could be traded or bought. They were a fortress, and I had defended it with a quiet, unyielding strength.